October is finally here, and the Winnipeg Jets are trying to make it through the last of the preseason as unscathed as humanly possible. Been a little bit easier said than done.
You're Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at AgeOfLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, we are diving into some takeaways from the game against Minnesota, one of the last preseason games, and the fact that the Jets are kind of dealing with a little bit of an injury scare spout right now. Some injuries are very real, some are not, and Winnipeg is definitely on track to start the year a little bit shorthanded. So, could be a very interesting next few weeks, and that's probably going to have an impact on who gets sent down, who stays up with the Jets, a lot of stuff to sort through. But I want to talk about the Minnesota game first and sort of the sloppier parts of the preseason, maybe some things for improvement, some areas where the Jets have been strong. But before we do, did want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, Winnipeg walked into Minnesota on a Tuesday evening, and unfortunately, things didn't quite go nearly as cleanly and according to plan as you'd expect. You know, the Jets did actually start off well enough. They did control the earlier first part of the period, and in the opening frame, Cole Koepka did get his nice cleanup goal, which I think, Cole just in general continues to be what I would describe as found money. I've talked about him being a bit of an underappreciated gem, maybe one of these fourth liners that actually has a really good functioning set of hands married to some smart IQ. I always feel like you can never have too much intelligence on your team, and Koepka kind of marries a lot of different things. He's relatively smart with the puck, he's patient, and he does a lot of the other fourth line or bottom six energy player type things that can endear you to a coaching staff. And he actually finishes off plays. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you love to see. I definitely am a fan of that. I was less a little bit of a fan later in the period when pierre-luc and Stanley, who are paired together, kind of got beat on a very clear play straight up the middle. Matt Boldy took a pass, and I think it was Stanley who stepped up and pinched a little too aggressively. Both pierre-luc and Stanley kind of got made to look a little silly, which, not really something that you are, I would say, unaccustomed to seeing when they're together. Defensively, these guys are maybe not as suited to shutting down these kinds of passes, maybe these kinds of plays, and Boldy is an elite forward. So, yeah, it is what it is, right? It happens in preseason, but I'm sure, both of them probably will prefer that it stays in the preseason. The second period was also pretty eventful. The Jets kind of thought that they were going to start taking control of this game. They had some very strong shifts where, the top six and bottom six were generating some good scoring chances. They had occasionally the Wild reeling on a few shifts that, maybe Winnipeg would put a shot just wide, finish off a passing play just very nearly hitting pay dirt, but ending up falling just short. But Vladdy the Batty ended up, getting the Jets the lead. Things were feeling pretty good. And then, the Jets kind of got into a little bit of penalty trouble. And with Kaprizov, it's just not a dude you can allow to be on the power play, right? He just signed a massive $17 million a season deal. And, of course, he decides to make the most of it by scoring in preseason to celebrate. So, it is what it is, right? It's preseason. I did kind of notice Fleury shoving somebody down by the side of the net, which I thought was a little bit funny. I don't know that it was necessarily super helpful on the PK, but, it is what it is. The less great part out of that was probably when the Jets finally got their own power play later, and, Pierre-luc made a really risky pass at his own blue line. It got picked off. Chibrikov tried to do something to stop the counter, which I probably would not recommend he ever attempts again. That was a rather funny desperation play, the kind of thing that does happen in preseason. You might make a little bit of a bad call. And, unfortunately, Marcus Foligno scores shorthanded, and that would be all the scoring for the rest of the night. I think you can kind of see some themes here where the Jets would play decently well, some good forechecking, some good scoring chances created, but those mistakes kind of cost them a bit. And I hope that it's something that, they clean up and kind of avoid for the start of the regular season. But given, the absence of Dylan Samberg, who, if you missed it, he is out for around 6 to 8 weeks, that's really dire news for the Jets' blue line. And I think what we saw with Arniel kind of rejuggling the lines and deep pairings, the deep pairings were just awful. I don't think that they really were how I would arrange them whatsoever. And I know what he's trying to do with some of these, but it just, no. I think there has to be some thought given to some of these combinations if you're going to try them. Hanela Miller probably would have been a much stronger pairing than what we saw throughout most of the evening. So it is what it is. He's got his preferences, but I will say the juggled deep pairings that he put together against Minnesota, I would be happy not ever seeing them again. They just don't have the right chemistry. I think there was a mismatch of styles, all that kind of stuff. But it is what it is, right? Again, it's preseason. The Jets are still working some kinks out. But unfortunately, the bad news didn't quite stop there. Toews and Namestnikov both left the game later. You had Namestnikov, who got pulled by a concussion spotter. Good news is he seems to be okay. So, that's great. Toews tweaked something, and that was maybe not the happiest news. It's always been a little bit of a risk with him, having a couple years off. He hasn't really had his body up to game speed. And when you're getting back into action, especially against a team like Minnesota, which, can we just take a moment and say that Minnesota kept boarding Jets in preseason hockey? A little ridiculous, guys. Come on, Minnesota. What are you doing, right? But Toews obviously was getting pushed around a bit. He still held his own, I would say. I thought he withstood the Minnesota forecheck and physicality pretty well. But, at his age, he's 37, 38. All you have to do is rotate wrong, and you could kind of, dislocate something or maybe tweak something or strain something. As a fellow over 30 now, I respect it and understand it. So, hopefully whatever he has doesn't seem like it's too serious from early reports, but they have mentioned that it is more day-to-day. And I want to talk about later how that whole injury situation might really impact the Jets' start of the season. I think right now Winnipeg is kind of skating a little bit on thin ice, but because of that, it does potentially open up opportunities for some of the kids to step up and maybe get a shot that they didn't normally have if everyone was healthy. So, preseason is what it is. I don't tend to read too much into things. I think we already know what the Jets are going to do in terms of their lineups. Some of the stuff that we saw in this game was just, Arniel messing around because a couple of guys didn't want to travel, and, he was trying to compensate for maybe Nyquist being one of those, all that fun stuff. So, do I really worry about it? No. At this point, I just really want guys to get healthy and make sure that they do not fall victim to the injury bug that seems to be chasing the Jets a little bit as of late. Now, I mentioned the injury stuff is kind of a little bit of a concern. I want to chat about how it might be an okay opportunity for some of the Jets' youth to really make their presence known. But before we do, did want to shout out our friends and partners at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth. Whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments, when you don't have the full picture, you could be leaving money on the table. That's why Monarch Money is here to help. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is here for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data viz, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. If you have a partner or spouse, you can have a shared account so you'll always be on the same page together, making sure that your spending is being tracked, your investments are accruing the sort of profile that you want, and you can even set goals together. So again, you're always on the same page and you can succeed and thrive together. As somebody who has families with quite a few investments, it's nice to know that there's a service out there looking out for you so that you can keep it all in one convenient place instead of going to all these different sources. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's episode as we are chatting a little bit about the Jets right now, kind of dealing with what I would call, halfway a Jets injury scare, halfway injury reality. Obviously, Winnipeg already came into the start of the season missing Lowry, which I think is going to be a little more impactful and important than maybe people acknowledge. But I don't think any of us was really prepared for Dylan Samberg to have like a broken wrist. That news hit earlier this week, and that's just, 6 to 8 weeks for no Samberg. I guess the positive is that at least some of that includes preseason. But, for about a month or so, we're going to have to see the Jets try and survive without Samberg. And the last time that the Jets had to do this, they were like a dead-even 500 team. So with this squad being a little bit older and slower, I don't know how that's going to work. You heard me kind of talk about the Jets' D pairings against the Wild in preseason action. The new combinations were really bad, and I don't think that they're going to be the kind that I would put against, routine NHL lineups. I know Arneal's just kind of messing around and trying to see what can stick. But yeah, there are some pairings that I just don't think you ever really want to see again. As far as the Jets are concerned, I think they'll figure out a way to try and compensate. I don't know what that way is, though. It's not going to be Salamonson because he was sent back down to the Moose earlier today. So, what you see is probably what you get with the current crop of D. I would imagine that, you've got some combination of Fleury, Stanley, Hanela, and Miller trying to fill the gaps here. And we already knew that there was going to be probably some sort of a battle for the third pairing. Shen also involved in that. But I just don't know how, Arneal's going to do this. My best guess is we're going to see Fleury-Pionk again. And Fleury-Pionk is not that much different from Stanley Pionk. I guess it's just faster. But in terms of like the decision-making and stuff, we'll just have to hope, is how I would say. This is kind of hard to really replace Samberg's impact. Dylan is a really important stabilizing force for the Jets' blue line, and so without him, it's going to be a little bit chaotic. And on top of that, we're starting to get these moments where the Jets forwards are having a few injury scares themselves. Winnipeg has put a lot of eggs in this Toews basket, and he left the game, yesterday with a minor tweak of some sort. Again, it doesn't sound like it's serious. Arneal mentioned later this afternoon that it was day-to-day kind of stuff, and he was featuring in the practice groups for tomorrow, so it doesn't seem super serious, right? But I think when you're talking about a guy who's supposed to be your 2C, the health situation is probably of more important concern because, honestly, the Jets don't really have that many players who can replace him. They're already down Lowry. Namestnikov had to get pulled from a concussion spotter. Again, he seems to be okay, but the Jets' depth is really being tested right now. Normally, you'd be a little bit nervous about that. I think the one positive spin here is that the Jets do have a lot of young players who are trying to make their mark on this team, and a few of them have actually been playing center as of late. One of those guys that could potentially benefit from this is Brad Lambert. If at any point, some of these guys are maybe needing a night off or something, you might see a Brad come back in. We did see him play with Shibrikov recently. He's kind of been in and out of the preseason lineup. He is still with the team right now. And so I think, obviously injuries really suck. And especially, a new signing like Toews, this is your hometown hero. This is your big guy. So you really want him to be as healthy as possible. You want him to have his comeback as he is hoping to really carry home. But if things maybe take a little bit of a rough turn, it's good to know that you have Jets youth who are ready to step up. David Gustafson's a guy that I'd also like to see get another real look. I continue to believe that he has more skill and more, ability to offer this team than what the Jets have given him credit for. They still think that he's like a fourth line winger, and I think he's got more in the tank. Is he ever going to be like an elite top six guy? No. But if you're looking for somebody who projects to maybe be kind of like an Adam Lowry light sort of player, I think Gus is maybe your closest analog. And if you have two of those on your team, you really can't be too upset about that. Lowry and Gus maybe becoming like a shutdown sort of duo. I would absolutely pay money to see that. That's pretty dang nice, especially if they can keep, creating chances and keep the puck in the offensive zone, which is important. As far as Namestnikov is concerned, obviously you don't really want him hurt. He plays, such a vital role. He's a real team guy, and everyone loves him. So, hopefully that knock that he took again seems like he's okay. He's been cleared. Doesn't seem like that's going to hold him back. So he should be back. But all that stuff sort of accumulates, and in your 30s, the more of these sorts of hits and stuff you take, the longer it does start to get before you can really feel at your best. So. Even though he might be okay on paper and he's saying he's fine, obviously that accumulation does catch up with you. So hopefully it doesn't in his case, and he's okay, feeling good to go. The Jets really can't afford to lose too many centers. In general, they can't afford to lose many players, period, but much less their centers where they don't have quite as many players who can step in and then fill that void. They've got plenty of wing depth guys like Chibrikov, Lambert plays wing, Ford plays wing. Gus apparently now plays wing, so I think they can handle, the wide depth being, maybe not as good, but to start the season, yeah, you just don't want to have to deal with more than Samberg and Lowry already out. That's a pretty significant injury situation as it is, and any extra pressure that gets put upon like the top six and all that is just not really needed. So. Even if there's a chance that the youth might get more games, you want to make sure that they're doing so in a supportive environment and not having to be thrown straight into the fire, right? You don't want them having to take on the mantle of what Toews was supposed to do immediately to start the year. I suppose the other positive spin is that, when stuff like this has happened, the Jets always have like a next man up mentality. I think regardless of what happens on the ice, you can always rest assured that the guys will step up, they'll do their best. Yes, they may struggle out there, but I think they're always going to give 100% and really try and carry the burden when somebody else can't. So, hopefully through the next couple of weeks, and especially to start the season, the Jets can weather this, they can get through it. You really don't want this to impact the start of their season and put them behind the eight ball already. We already had a little bit of a scare, a couple of days ago with Hellebuck saying that he didn't feel right. Might have just been a little bit of an illness. Seems like the flu is kind of rolling around. So, again, with all the Jets injuries that are already kind of impacting the start of the season, your number one goalie, you don't want to have that happen. So, the importance of the depth is going to be very clear the next couple of days and weeks. We'll have to see if it's going to impact the opening night lineup. So far, outside of Lowry and Samberg, I think most of what we talked about earlier continues to be true for the lineup. CSV, Perfetti, Nyquist, and Toews. I follow Namestnikov and Niederreiter and some combination of Koepka, Barron, and maybe Gus or something, or Pearson probably. So as long as those guys stay healthy for the most part, we should be okay to start the season. But yeah, prayers out for Samberg and Lowry to get back as quickly as possible and at full strength. Hopefully nobody else gets injured. Wrap Toews in some bubble wrap if you have to. Try and survive this last game in the next couple of weeks at camp. Just getting through this and ready for the start of the season. October 9th is just a little over a week away, and if we can make it to that without any more injuries, I would be absolutely thrilled. No more teams in preseason trying to take our guys out and throwing some illegal checks if possible, right? That'd be fantastic. I think I've watched enough of the Jets as it is getting a couple of knocks and injuries that they frankly just don't even need. So cross your fingers for that. But amidst all that, it is making a little bit of a challenge for the Jets to figure out who to send down. But they are still making some camp cuts. Ken Wiebe had a few more from the Jets practices this afternoon and from the Jets announcements. We'll check in on who else got sent back to the Moose or to their respective junior organizations in just a brief moment. Before we do, though, wanted to shout out our friends and partners at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your first bet wins, that is $300 in bonus bets to your account. That's right, pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If you think that this is your chance to figure out whether Cooper Rush can lead the Ravens to a big victory over the Texans, now is your time to get in on the action. Maybe you feel like the Texans are going to right their own ship. It hasn't exactly been the best season for C.J. Stroud and company, but maybe, against a soft Ravens defense, this is the way to go. Or perhaps you are riding the high of a big Kansas City win over this past weekend. Maybe you think that Mahomes' magic has finally returned. Well, you can take advantage, and if your first $5 bet wins, get $300 in bonus bets to keep on winning only with the FanDuel app. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Hey friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for rejoining us as we're just talking a little bit about who else has been sent away from the Jets camp. For the camp cuts that we had this afternoon, we saw Cale Clegg, Aaron Anderson-Dolan, and Fagemo sent down to waivers, and probably, if they go through, I would expect they go through, they will report to the Moose. Fagemo obviously is one of our more risky guys that might get claimed in terms of AHL depth. He is he's an all-star AHL kind of player. He's an elite scorer at that level. So hopefully, nobody puts in a claim. I would expect that people would only do that if they're really in need of like serious depth. And otherwise, I can't really see anyone here maybe being at risk. Anderson-Dolan's probably the closest to being an NHLer, and even then, I think a lot of teams tend to have players of his caliber already on the roster, so I'd expect those folks to make it through. The day before, we also had Isaac Phillips and Tyrell Bauer sent down. Neither got claimed. In terms of what we saw from both of those guys, I thought Phillips was solid enough as like a 7th D type. Bauer, he's more of the guy who's, I think, honestly, an AHL level enforcer, right? You don't necessarily see a lot of the puck moving skill and stuff that translates necessarily to NHLer, but I think at the AHL level, his value is really in protecting the kids, being that strong, steady force on the back end, and just being a guy who's not afraid to stand up for his teammates and defend them. I think there's actually quite a bit of value in that, and especially with how young this Moose team is going to be this year, making sure that's, people just don't take stupid runs at Winnipeg's players might not be the worst thing. So hopefully he'll do well and be fine. On the side of exempt players that got sent down, Milic, Salomonson, Jaeger, and Barlow got assigned earlier today. And, none of that's really surprising. I think for Jaeger, his Moose stint's probably not going to be too much longer than a year. I really feel like he'll only need one Moose season or so, maybe 2 max. I think he looked a lot closer in some ways than I expected, right? Which is the same thing we said last year. I thought he looked really close to pro-level comp last season, and it just seems like he gets better and better each game. He might not have the craziest reads or biggest performances, but those quiet D reads, those smart little plays, those good little passes, it all just seems to be pushing him more and more in the direction of being an NHLer, and a really solid one. Again, I don't really know where his ceiling is necessarily going to fall. I know people are hoping that he becomes maybe a 2C at some point. That is still a little ambitious, but I think he has the work ethic and drive to become that kind of player. I just want to say, let's caution it and sort of remember that, this league has a very high barrier of entry for skill, and, it'll take him some time. But if there is a player that reasonably could become the 2C, he may have one of the best inside shots at it. We'll have to see how it shakes out, right? I have a lot of confidence in Jaeger being really good regardless of what level of player he is. Whether he's a second liner, a third liner, a fourth, I think he'll excel in whatever role the Jets ask him to do. I just have to see, what he does this coming Moose season but I think he's kind of going to do the Salamonson thing. I think the adaptation to the pro leagues is going to be very fast. I think his Moose season is going to see some really meteoric growth throughout the year. I'm very excited about him, and I think you should be too. Preseason, I think he has really shown why he is one of Winnipeg's top prospects. Salamonson, for his part, he's probably NHL ready as it is, more so because you need to get him used to NHL timing and space. I don't know that the AHL really has a lot for him left. He was already really good at it last year. Yeah, maybe some of the decision making and stuff is what you'd be talking about and focusing on, but I thought in preseason he was really composed, and a lot of the rookie mistakes and things you saw less of this time around. So he's probably closer to being ready for some real NHL time than he is with the Moose. But I know how the Jets are. We know how this blue line is composed. I do think they value him pretty highly, though, and it won't be long before he actually does start getting NHL reps. Barlow, also really impressed with him. Thought he looks to be very close to pro ready. He looked a lot more at the races. He looks like he's going to be a really solid top 9 for the Moose. How much further he progresses, we'll see, right? With his pro-ready skills and playmaking ability and creativity that he showed in camp, that's the exact step that I'd been waiting for him to really take forward, and he looks like a pro-ready player. So, cheers to him. Let's hope he has a big rookie pro season. I think he could be a real surprise this year for a lot of folks, especially if what he did in preseason continues his trend with the Moose. So, looking forward to that. Milic, I thought, was okay. We didn't really see a lot of him during preseason in camp. I think between him and DiVincentis, obviously DiVincentis is really the Jets' blue chip prospect. Don't sleep on Milic just yet. If he can find a way to really have a strong season at the AHL level, I think that'd be great, right? Or even if he plays with the ECHL Admirals, that's fine too. Just, find a level that you can be really successful at, keep honing the craft. It's not like there's a ton of availability for goaltending at the Jets level anyways, so, there's no rush for either of these guys to seize one of the backup spots. But rooting for Milic to come through, and if not, it is what it is. I think there are plenty of teams that would be willing to give him a shot to see if maybe he can kind of rekindle that spark. He was a pretty highly thought of Canadian prospect, and maybe there's a chance that, if it doesn't work out with the Jets, somebody else might be able to find a better spot for him. The Jets are kind of deep at goalies, so it's a very competitive spot here. Very good environment, but if he develops well and continues to show, big strides forward, I think that's all you can really ask for. But curious to know what you thought of some of these guys who got sent down. Were you surprised by any of these demotions? Let me know in the comments below or at my social media at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. On tomorrow's episode, we'll review our final preseason game and talk about any of the outstanding injury concerns, anything else that has popped up with the news. Obviously, the Kyle Connor contract is still out there, so Lord knows when that's going to get done. But at least for now, we are waiting for the start of the season, and it is almost here. So we'll chat about that, but we'll see you then. As always, have a great night, and go Jets go.